Welcome to the Sustainable Living Podcast. Tips, tools, and tactics for living a heart-centered life that honors Mother Earth and her inhabitants. The information shared on the Sustainable Living Podcast reflects the opinions of host Marianne West, Janice Fryatt, and their guests. Please use your own discretion in research before applying any information to your individual situation. Now, here are your hosts, Marianne and Janice.
Welcome to the podcast, everyone. I'm Janice Fryatt.
And I'm Marianne West.
Yes. And today we're going to do a little bit of an update and share some tips regarding really simple things that you can do to make your life more sustainable and have a much less negative impact on the planet. Really simple things. So I really highly recommend that you stay on the podcast until the end, because there's some really easy stuff here. But we're also going to share a little bit about what's been going on with us. So in that vein, Mariana, what's been going on with you?
Yeah, there's always lots going on with me, so I don't know how I manage to do that. So I have two big things I want to talk about today, and one of them is healthcare, and the other one is remodeling. So let's start with healthcare, because that's like hugely on my mind, and I'm going to share a little bit private information, and it's female private information. So if you're a guy and you don't want to hear it, just close your ears for a little bit. It's not not graphic, okay? But okay, so I want to give you a little bit of my health background. I had cancer when I was 45, I think, colon cancer, which my dad passed away from when he was about 60. And at the time, I was really angry about this because I had lived very healthy, no sugar, no white flour, buying organic, doing all of this stuff, eating whole foods, all of those things. And I'm like, really, colon cancer? What the heck, And so I found out about that there is kind of a family link, like there is with breast cancer, which at the time, and this is, so even though I was eating very healthy, I was not living a healthy lifestyle. I owned a store. It was a small grocery store, and I was working almost 24/7. I was literally working 7 days a week, and often 12, 13, 14 hours. And then you take the bookkeeping home, and, all of the trials and tribulations of running a business, which can be, especially a small business and having to do with perishables, can be challenging. Let's put it that way. So I definitely didn't have a lot of rest. And, I was hiking. That was kind of my sanity check. And I think that's the only thing which kept me sane and alive, to go out and have my hour of running up the mountain and running down the mountain. So anyways, my only symptoms were that I was really tired. And I justified being tired because I was working all the time, So all of those things. So it was several circumstances, lucky for me, that we found out, because otherwise I would not talk to you right now, So fast forward to today, I think everybody knows what a pap smear is, right? So I had some of them come back not normal, abnormal, as if you ever have watched Young Frankenstein, you know what abnormal means. And if you haven't watched it, you have to watch it. It's a classic. It belongs to the education, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I had those abnormal pap smears coming up, and a couple of 3 years ago, I did a colposcopy. I think that's how you pronounce it. I should look that up.
Are you talking about like for your colon?
No, it's colposcopy. I don't know. Gosh, I have it written down somewhere, and I don't have the paper in. Oh yeah, I do have the paper in front of me. Let's see. colposcopy. That's, and I probably pronounce it wrong anyways. But basically, it's taking a little bit of tissue off the cervix, and then that gets biopsied, and then you get results back. So the results were that it was a bit something abnormal, but to be watched and so forth, so no immediate action to be taken. And I'm not always a huge fan of, the regular medical systems of what are my choices, right? So I kind of up-leveled my vitamin D and doing more greens and all of those kind of things. And the procedure is very unpleasant. I basically passed out. So it's painful and it's not fun. Right. And then at the same time, there is, the discussion in the health and alternative health areas, doing too many pap smears and, this kind of things can actually irritate and actually cause a problem. So, I'm going back and forth. How often do I do this? But, a couple of years have gone by. And since my body has already at one time been not that supportive of me, I decided I should go ahead and have another one of those pap smears, which came back abnormal again. So I'm faced with doing this procedure. And I do have insurance, which cost me over $500 a month. And I chose that plan because I consider myself healthy. So I'm not, going to the doctor all the time. And at the same time, I'm not sure if I did the right thing, because the next plan up is like $750 a month. But with the plan I now have a $6,300 deductible I have to meet before the insurance pays anything.
Wow.
Right? So I went ahead and I scheduled the procedure, and then my daughter, who works for Planned Parenthood, said, well, let me check what it costs at Planned Parenthood. Maybe, you want to do it there. And so basically the cost at Planned Parenthood is around $500 for this particular procedure. So now I'm trying to find out what it costs me to do it at my insurance plan is Sharp. And I have been calling and nobody can give me that answer. And it's driving me crazy. So I'm hoping that I have the answer by tomorrow, because if it's like, $2,000 or $4,000, I might not want to do that. And, and then there's a thinking, well, if I go outside, it definitely doesn't apply to my deductible. If they find something which needs further action, which could be, a hysterectomy or that kind of thing, then did I throw away $500 to go outside of the system and do the procedure, not applying to my deductible? So it's really crazy in many ways, so those of you which are listening from other countries where you might have central health care, be happy that you have that, because, we are not rich by any means, but we can manage somehow to come up with that, even if we need to do a payment plan and so forth. And I do have the health insurance to begin with, because if you're fully paying out of pocket for any kind of insurance, like when I had the cancer, and at the time, on the advice of my homeopath and so forth, I had a whole year of chemo, which was awful. But just even every single one of those chemo treatments was like a $700 copayment. So, and my hospital bill was, I forgot, but it was like in the $10,000s of dollars. And that was my copayment.
Oh.
And basically the way insurances work, they disallow a whole bunch of charges. But if you are uninsured and you're paying out of pocket, you have to pay for all of those charges. So like this, 2-day hospital stay was, like, I don't know, I forgot the exact, but if I would have paid out of pocket, I would have paid like several $100,000. And so with the insurance, it was still in the $10,000s of dollars. Plus, it was like 2 days. My friend just had breast cancer operation in Germany, and she was in the hospital for 2 weeks. Here it's like, okay, this, we take off your breast, and this afternoon you're out of here unless you have like, high fevers and stuff. So I just, wanted to bring this up because it's just such a dilemma of, I mean, there was part of me which said, okay, would I go down the road of chemo again? And the answer is probably no, because it was super miserable. And, and the more you study all these things, it's very questionable if chemo does anything to help you along, At the same time, this is pretty much what most of the allopathic treatment gives you. So then it's like, okay, so what are your other options? And they're nutritional, and a lot of it is mind body, to let go of stress and to do all of those things, right? And so, there's part of me which goes, well, maybe I should just pretend that there is some going on and do all the steps I would do. But at the same time, there's part of me which is like, no, I really need to know if there is, anything going on. And, and there are surgical interferences which might be helpful and all of that. But I was really bringing it up more because of the focus on money. Said healthcare is really a privilege in this country. If you just, this is a non-emergency procedure basically. So if you don't have the money to pay up, you're not going to get it. So it just. And especially since, there's a debate of what's going on in the Senate and healthcare and all of those kind of things. And just as a country, I feel we really have to look at this,
Yeah.
And I know, as a country, we're spending tons of money on healthcare, and very little of that goes actually to patient care. And, and I have no solution. I have nothing to offer as a solution. I'm just here saying, it's hitting me right now on a very personal level. And this is kind of the time where you start thinking about this whole thing again and go, okay, so what can we do? What can we do? So brainstorming.
Yeah, it's a very big deal. And again, I don't have the answers either, but I do know, first off, that sucks. And I am so sorry that that's happening for you, my friend. It really sucks. And I know I say that from a place of compassion because in one way, shape, or form, we've all kind of been there. Maybe things that aren't quite so scary, but we get scared about our health. And where do we have to go? We have these institutions, these places that we have to bring these very gut-wrenching things to people who are not interested that much in getting us better. They're just interested in profit as the bottom line. So, that's why we always say it all goes back to having a heart-centered approach. Everything should have a heart-centered approach. And when we continue to make thinking that profits as the ultimate goal is what's going to lift everybody up. And when we look around us and see all the devastation that thinking has wrought, we have to make a change. We're on the verge of a shift. I believe we are on the verge of a shift. And I do see in the very not too distant future that we will be making changes that are more heart-centered, and that our medical system will reflect that. And in the meantime, sweetie, you got a community here of people who are supporting you with what's going on. So,
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Speaking of communities, so we started this little thing of it's very short term so far. So only maybe 4 or 5 of you have gotten a little video message from us when you were signing up for the email list. And hopefully we can continue it. It's a little app. It's called Bonchoro. And basically it allows you to see who has joined what we call our Sustainable Living Geeks tribe. So basically it's our email community, right? And then you can send them a picture message. So right now you will get the message. It says Sustainable Living Podcast on it. And then you see, like a little hello, we're so happy you joined and all of that. And if you had already for a while ago signed up for our email and you would like to get one of those messages, just send us an email saying, hey, I want my personal greeting, and we send it to you. And that said, the paid version right now, we're on a trial. The paid version is like $25 a month. And I think that's beyond what we can justify right now to spend on the podcast, since we are paying for everything else out of pocket. But if one of you wants to be the sponsor of the Bonchoro, so everybody gets a video message, go right ahead and let us know. We would love it. Otherwise, it's just going to be generic. The free version, you have to put a little bit more work in it. Mm-hmm. So that said, I wanted to come back to money on a different level. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it on the podcast yet or not, but we had a problem in the bathroom. Said our subfloor, we're on a raised foundation, and so there is a wood floor basically. And I think maybe you can hear some noise in the background because we are working on that bathroom. Not me, but a person I hired is working on the bathroom as we speak. So if you hear some weird noises in the background, that's what's going on. And so we had to replace that wood piece around the toilet, which had gotten all rotted out, and some beams underneath. Now with that comes that you had to take off all the flooring which was on there, which was just a vinyl flooring when we bought the house. And I hadn't even thought about what to do about that until the contractor said, well, what do you want to put on here? So, we have been talking about more environmentally friendly solutions to floor covering, right? So tile is really high in energy costs and so forth to produce. So it's not a super environmentally friendly option. Vinyl is no good because it's a product made from oil basically, and it has lots of fumes. It's gassing off to not add to your health. So let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. So then you have bamboo and you have cork, which both are possibilities, but in a bathroom where you have water. And I have a husband who, I don't know how he does it, but when he showers, there's always water on the floor. And for some reason, it's always still there when I come in. So somehow that water doesn't seem to be able to be picked up or cleaned up by him. So that's not a great option then either, because if you have too much water on that, it can be a problem. So we came to linoleum, and linoleum is made from natural materials. It doesn't off-gas. It has been around forever. I do remember that we used to wax the linoleum back home. There was a whole part to it where we got to stand on the buffer because it makes it heavier and it makes it shine better. And
I'm curious. Can you tell us, or do you know what linoleum is made of?
Yes, I know. I don't know if I can remember everything, but it's made from like wood dust and cork dust and hardened linseed oil.
Okay.
And there are some other ingredients, and usually it's kind of a burlap on the bottom.
Okay.
It's a bottom layer of it. And it requires a little bit better preparation of the floors than maybe a vinyl floor does.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a couple of interesting things about it. I went to all kinds of places to research that, to see what's available. It's a small bathroom. We only need like 4x7. I think that's kind of the length we need for the bathroom, or that's the size. So not a huge bathroom, right? So I was hoping to find a remnant somewhere and so forth. Well, all the big box stores, I walk in and I ask them, do you have linoleum? And they say yes. And they point me right to vinyl. So it's like, no, I want linoleum. And most of them is like, well, what's the difference? And so I would have to explain. And then, and this is people which work in the flooring department. And then we ended up at the flooring places. That's all they do. And one of the places I called, the guy quizzed me what's the difference. And I'm like, well, if you don't know the difference, I don't want to buy from you, right?
Right.
And we had gone to one place and they knew and they had samples of stuff and we looked at it, my husband and I together. And then she was all, well, it has to be done in a certain way and we should be doing it. And I asked her, well, how much does it cost to install it? And she was saying, well, the installation is about $1 per square foot. And I said, okay, that's not too bad. And then her coworker pipes up, but there's a $250 minimum. And it's like, yeah, that makes it from like, so what is 4x7? That's like maybe 28, 30, let's say maximum like 30 square feet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brings it from about $30 to $250 for installation. I'm like, So, and our contractor was like, yeah, he can do that. So that part was fine. So I go back to actually buy the piece and it's a different person, but also working in this all dedicated to flooring. That's all they do. They don't do anything else, right? So I'm looking again just to make sure that I have the right pattern I had been choosing. And then she says, oh, look at this. This is kind of retro. You might really like it. And I liked the pattern. And then I started feeling it. And I'm like, I don't think this is linoleum, So, yeah. And sure enough, it was vinyl. And I was like, do I really have to be so vigilant that I'm coming here and saying, I'm looking for linoleum for this reason? I want it to be eco. I want it to be all of those things, right? I don't want the off-gassing. And then the person brings me something totally different.
Yeah.
And I had to be the one to watch out, said by accident, I'm not going home with the wrong product, right?
Yeah.
That's one. The other one is that piece of flooring, just the material, ended up costing me $350. And if I would have gone to Home Depot and got a little bit piece of vinyl, it probably would have cost me $20 to $50.
Wow.
So, I really do understand that it's difficult to follow your desires of being more sustainable because it is a huge difference. It's a big difference. And again, you can absolutely justify it with the long term. This linoleum has a life of 40 years, which I might not have 40 years. That would make me to be 100. So
yeah, I'm curious how that compares to. I'm curious how that compares to vinyl.
Vinyl.
Vinyl doesn't last as long.
No. I think the life of it is usually like looked at as 10 years, and it damages much quicker and it's much thinner. I mean, even if you look at the product, vinyl is like maybe a third of the thickness of it.
Yeah.
Well,
you've mentioned several things that I did not know about that I will use when I go to do flooring for my place. What the things that stick out to me from what you just said is that, okay, yes, it's going to cost more. and I'm going to have to fight to get it. I'm going to have to make it very, very clear over and over and over again that that's what I want. But I will have the advantages of it lasting longer, and I will have the advantages of it cutting down on very likely my health costs in the future too, because
Absolutely.
yeah, you're paying up front for this long-term a resilience of it, and also for it being not toxic. And as sustainable living geeks, that's a big deal to us. We're willing to put the money up because we know we end up getting it back. But yeah, in the beginning, man, it's not easy, is it?
No, it really isn't. And yeah, all I'm saying is I can understand that people don't always feel like they have a choice. That said, personally, I could have just gone with painting the wood floor and go with that for a while until I've saved up for, doing this. So, and yeah.
But you have a choice when you have the information, when you know the difference. And right now, by explaining this to people, you've actually given people a choice that they didn't know they had. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. So anyways, yeah. So my big point was be vigilant, and look at, obviously a lot of people's newer houses are built on slabs now, so you can't just paint the concrete and have floor racks, so in the raised foundation, the base wood looks really ugly, but again, we could have painted it, but I don't think my husband would have gone for that. So there are cheaper ways. But also I wanted to acknowledge that I understand the argument that in the short term, making all those choices, just the same like with buying organic clothing. If you buy an organic T-shirt to print some on, it probably costs you $15, while a plank of regular is like $3. So there is a little bit that element of privilege involved, or of really having to decide where you spend your money. And that's a discussion I have been having with friends. And their point was that we all have money, and it's just about choices, how we spend it. I do want to acknowledge, though, that especially living in Southern California, sometimes just paying for housing and for food is all people can do. And they really don't have such a big choice about, other things.
Right. We all have to make choices based on our information and our capabilities in our own situation, But when you have the information, you actually have the opportunity to make the choice. We have to make compromises. This is the kind of world that we live in. It's not black and white. It's not easy to just completely go all sustainable all of a sudden. And I think we've made that point over and over again on this podcast that, it's not about looking around and judging yourself and judging other people based on how sustainable they are. It's about each person looking at themselves and seeing what works for them based on good information, which is something we do try to provide on this podcast. So again, thanks.
Yeah. So, and our listeners are part of providing that information, right? So
yeah.
Let's get away from me being like, health, bathroom.
Yeah.
To some positive tips what we can do.
Yeah. And let me see if I can find my tips. I found them. Okay. So to begin with, we're going to have a little bit of a theme today on our tips based on several that we kind of put together that kind of are related. And you'll see what the theme is, I think, as we go through them. The first one comes from a very frequent tip provider, and that is Stephanie McCoy. And she writes, don't buy single-use packaging and try really hard not to buy so much plastics and things with labels, especially ones with plastic labels. She says, ever wonder how much waste goes into that label on your package? I will show you. So I guess we have to have Stephanie on here to show us specifically.
Absolutely. We absolutely need to have Stephanie on. And Stephanie is working in the package or has worked in the packaging industry. So she really knows what she's talking about, how much goes into packaging and how much waste is there. And also, I want you all to think about how much packaging is used to make you want to buy the product, to make the product look bigger or better.
Yeah.
How many times have you bought like a tiny little thing, like an inch big, and the package is like a foot long and 3 inches wide or
but
something?
You know what? I think for our audience, that when we see stuff like that, we get angry. I know I get angry. I know a lot of the people that are listening get angry and specifically veer away from those kinds of purchases. Am I right?
Absolutely, but I don't think it's always possible. I mean, we have talked about, you can buy used and you can do all those things, but let's say you want, like for us as podcasters, right? We use microphones, and I don't always know if buying used electronics is the best way to go, especially it's hard to fix things, and a lot of time people get rid of their stuff. There's some, if you happen to know somebody who always gets the newest of everything coming out and then passes their older model along, you might be in luck. But just randomly buying a microphone because somebody got rid of it might indicate that microphone wasn't working that well anymore. It's just stuff like that. And if you order it, so things are always coming in plastic wrapping. Even my sustainable linoleum floor came in a big roll of plastic.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
And I didn't have a choice about it, That.
But I think again, that's such a wonderful golden nugget you said about the linoleum flooring. I won't forget about it, and I think a lot of the people that are listening won't forget about it. And when they go to purchase flooring, and they specifically ask, the linoleum manufacturers may start to realize, hey, we've got something here that a specific niche of sustainability-oriented people want. So once they realize that then they might start to think about other things that are related to that niche, such as plastic that they are packaging it with.
Well, this is a warehouse which packaged it like that. And I think the linoleum manufacturers know it because that's their angle to do this. It's more that the general public has started to use linoleum and vinyl as interchangeable. And so a lot of people are calling vinyl linoleum now, not understanding the difference. And I think what the manufacturers might work on more is to make the distinction clear again, because there is a rising market for people which want the non-gas off products and so forth. And on that note, I found, just to go back to my little remodel, how things always get bigger. So now you have the new floor, and we ended up with a new sink because our old sink was actually too big for the bathroom. So it was hard for my husband to bend, to fit in, to be able to sit on the throne, so to speak, And so we ended up with a much smaller one. And so now you have new furniture, right? So now we figured, well, we might as well fix the little holes in the wall and paint the whole thing. You know how one thing leads to another down the road of, oh my gosh, everything. But it was fairly easy to find paint which is non-fuming, which has no gas off. So that's a real positive. You can find it even at big box stores. But if you can, I would say go to the smaller paint stores, which are still around, and you get much better quality. And usually you find the contractors are going to those stores because they get better service, better quality. And so I wanted to give a shout out to Jacob, who helped me with the paint at a local store here. And I forgot the name of it because I hadn't heard it. It used to be Frazee, I think, and it has like a different name now. But yeah, so I gave him our card.
Yeah.
So hopefully he's listening to our podcast
Oh,
now.
good. Yeah. Yeah. No.
It's nice to go to a store where people actually know what they're talking about and are not looking at you like, oh, yeah, I don't know,
Yeah.
type of a thing like you get a
Yeah,
lot.
that's huge. And when you live in a small place like I do, you don't your choices are even more limited. So often I'm ordering online, and I have found I did some painting here in my house, and I've found some, definitely eco-friendly paints online. So it's not that hard to find. Yay, progress!
I know. It's very nice
Yeah.
to know that you don't have to dig so deep
Right.
to get stuff.
Right.
So back to Stephanie. So she definitely is an expert on packaging,
Yeah.
and we do want to have her on to tell us about it because it's one of those things like even so stupid little labels on an avocado, it's made out of
Oh, I
plastic.
know.
And if you put or an apple or whatever you get, and if you put it in your compost, you end up with a whole bunch of plastic in your compost with a potential of breaking down into tiny
Right.
little
I
particles.
hope that some of the larger organic farmers are going to find a solution to that. I'm really hoping to see that at some point where I can go buy produce that doesn't have stickers on it.
We used to have a solution. I mean, they used to put paper stickers on. And that was at least paper is,
Yeah.
compostable and breaks down. And I understand that people want to put the labels on because usually the cashiers do not know, is it this apple or that apple? And then the difference between organic or not organic. And actually, I used to, when we were doing the Gerson therapy, we went through so much letters and everything, I would buy it by the case. And I would ask him, or I would buy like 10 heads at a time. And I would ask him, can you please give it to me out of the box? I don't want all those ties and everything to go home with me and I have to throw away. And they would be super suspicious because they think I might want to pass it off as non-organic, which is half the price, right? And I'm like, no, it's fine. You can come with me to the cash register and tell them, I just don't want that extra garbage to take home, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Well, on that note, let's move on to our next tip, which is very on the same lines. And the tip is when you do buy something that comes in its own handy reclosable pouch, rinse it out and reuse it for something else. And that is by Green Aberdeen. I believe on Instagram, the tag is Green Aberdeen SD.
Yeah, follow them on Instagram. They do really cool stuff to, locally to help people to, achieve what we want to achieve to live a more sustainable life.
Wonderful. Yeah, on that note, I put out a video last week that was an update of my garden. It's on our Facebook page. And I talk about, as we know, we don't like to buy these things that are packaged. I prefer never to have packaging with any of my produce. But in the past, I have occasionally bought those containers of baby spinach. And they're convenient because it's all cleaned up. You don't have to wash it, blah, 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 but it comes in this plastic. And so what I do is I use that plastic in my garden. I use that container as a little mini greenhouse. If I have a small plant that it can fit under, and as you guys all know, I have issues with frosts here that just come from out of the blue sometimes. I just stick that little container, that plastic see-through container on top of the plant, and it does a very good job of protecting it from the cold. So that's one way I use these plastic containers. But a handy reclosable pouch, how often do we get those? We get our produce in those things as well. And gosh, you can use those over and over again, right?
Yeah, or frozen fruit if you make a lot of smoothies and you don't have enough fruit from your own garden. So yeah, I use those to then freeze my own produce in. And if you have like a bumper crop of berries or whatever, freeze them first flat on like a sheet or a plate, or or bananas. I let them get really ripe, and then I peel them, put them on a board, freeze them, and then you put them into the bag. So that way you can take them out individually. They are not sticking together. Like if you put them all in a bag and you freeze it, you get a big clump of something.
The way I do that is I take my really ripe bananas and I break them off into chunks, and I do put them in a reclosable bag, but then I make sure that it's all one layer, right? And I lay it flat,
right,
so that they don't, if they do stick together, they're stuck, so you can get them apart really easy. But
yeah, kind of the same principle. Yeah. And along the lines of those containers, I have used those too. I mean, a lot of people bring plastic into my house. It's like potluck or bring some over. And the other day I was looking at the amount, and then of course it doesn't go out because I'm not throwing it away. I need to recycle it, or I need to do some with it. So it's amazing how much plastic you amass, even if you are very actively avoiding it. But those little things you can even use as a greenhouse for plant starting. So I have filled them with like vermiculite, and then just threw plants on it, and then when they get and puts the lid on, so you have like a little misting house. And then you open the lid once in a while to give them a little bit of oxygen, and once they have two true leaves, it's very easy to pull them out and plant them into something else. So that's definitely another way to use it.
That's a great tip. I hope that maybe next time you do something like that, you'll take a picture of it. I think that a picture speaks 1,000 words on something like that, and we could share that.
I probably have. Yeah.
Well, cool. Okay, on to the next tip. I have Growing Your Own Removes the Food Packaging Conundrum, and that is by Amy Strauss of 10th Acre Farm, who was a previous guest on one of our podcasts that you interviewed, right, Marianne?
Yes, she was. And definitely check out her blog. There's so much you can learn from her. And when I interviewed her, she was living in a very small suburban lot, and she has since moved to a bigger place, and she has a lot of information on chronicling her turning this new place into a food forest permaculture place. Yeah, so her book is excellent, and actually we should ask Amy if she wants to donate some books, some of her ebooks for a drawing, because you probably know by now is that we had a drawing of Marissa's book, and we had 3 lucky winners.
Marissa Vicario, who wrote a wonderful book about becoming healthy in a holistic way, right?
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, actually, if you guys have any ideas, or even if you have something to offer, you would like to offer to our listeners as, a little incentive, as a prize, let us know, because a big thing what we want to do is bring to you value, not only as a podcast, but what is you want to call it, value added. Have products we can share with you, because that just makes it so much better if we can share stuff.
But getting back to the tip, she did say growing your own removes the food packaging conundrum. And I tell you, that is one of the biggest reasons why I have a garden, is because I just love being able to get my vegetables and my fruits straight from the ground, and plastic never has to touch it. I love that. I've cut down on so much of my trash just from having the garden. So that's a very, very good tip, and a very good reason to have a garden.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's so many good reasons, but whatever tickles your fancy to make you start.
Yeah.
And the packaging is a huge one.
It's a huge one.
All right.
Next tip, I have eat a plant-based diet and compost everything that's left over from your eating. And that tip was from Lisa Wrights. So Yeah, I mean, a lot of our listeners are vegetarians or vegans. Marianne and I are not, but we have been in the past, and we do recognize the value of that diet. But I'm sure that you've got some tips about dealing with whenever you have meat or any kind of meat. How do you deal with the packaging with that? Unfortunately, not that many of us can actually have a cow or a chicken to avoid the packaging that comes from. Um, but but we, there are, like, on the last episode of the podcast, I had interviewed. It was Elvira de Brigitte. Yes, Elvira de Brigitte. And she spent some time sharing this business model that a lot of the organic, small, sustainability oriented farmers are using, where it's like the CSAs, right? The community, what is that? What does CSA stand for?
Community supported agriculture.
Exactly, where these small farms are developing relationships directly with the people who purchase their products. And so on some of these farms, they are selling part of a cow to someone, right? And then those people who have purchased the cow get the milk. Or they get a portion of the milk. So that's one way. But a completely plant-based diet, you don't have to deal with that at all, right? So it is easier to cut down on packaging a bit, it seems like.
Well, yes and no. I mean, you're assuming that people actually make their own food and possibly even growing their own food, because you can have a plant-based diet and still eat a bunch of junk, which comes in a lot of packaging.
Mm-hmm.
So, that said, hopefully you don't. And no matter what diet you follow, there should I don't like the word should, but it's a good idea to have lots and lots of plants as the major part of your diet.
Mm-hmm.
That said, what you were talking about, there are meat co-ops where you can buy, a quota of something or go in with other people, but you still would have to process or package it in some way. And you mentioned you could have your own chickens and slaughter those. But let me tell you, it's in you read books like in the olden day, how the auntie or the grandma goes out and just grabs a chicken and then it's in the pot for dinner. I think most of us in our modern lifestyle, that's not really working out too well, because it's a bit of work and a bit of cleanup. And like when we process our little roosters, usually we do, 4 or 5 at a time to make it worse, like getting the water hot and getting all of those things in place. And then you have to do some with them, either can them or freeze them, or cook a big pot of soup and do some with that. So I think a lot of the packaging we're talking about is again plastic. And one thing I have not done yet, but we are in the process of exploring it, is to work with TerraCycle, where you can recycle difficult to recycle things. So obviously you would have to wash it and all of that. Also, when I talked to Carl Stanley from Manabu Farm, and I hope I pronounced that right, he actually is pointing us to a machine you can build. It's in the open source community where you can recycle plastic, your own plastic, into something else. And again, that's in the future, and I'm not a huge tech person, so when I look at the plan, my eyes kind of roll back in my head. But I'm sure I can find somebody. And I took before that we are starting this physical center of sustainability, and I'm hoping in our future to have both a TerraCycle center for collecting things, and then also to build one of those machines. And so for an individual, I believe you can contact TerraCycle and find if there's a center close to you, if somebody's doing it, or you can get a box and then you fill that with your recyclables, which you can't send to the municipal recycling place and then mail it to them and they do that. Now, if you have bones and skin or whatever else, or even leftover of meat, so the bokashi fermenting, you can ferment those and then add them to your regular compost. So those are ways to get rid of, the
Yeah,
leftovers.
those are great. And I think we've also talked before about the value of taking bones and reusing them to make bone broth and how valuable that is. So I just, you
Right.
got to get all the nutrients out of that wonderful organic food that you're eating. So, yeah. Anyway,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
So, well, okay,
definitely.
I've got one more tip because we're coming to the almost the end of our hour here. Um, and that is, it's a very simple one. Stay home and cook dinner. And that is by the Grochi family. I think their handle is Grochi Family Farm on Instagram. Boy, that's a simple one, isn't it? Imagine all the packaging that we could avoid if all we just cook, not just packaging, but we can avoid probably illnesses as well and all kinds of things if we are staying home and cooking dinner. We're also saving on fuel to go to the restaurant or wherever we're going, right? Can you think of anything else, Mariana?
But definitely the packaging is huge. I mean, if you ever my children really like Thai food and have like a favorite restaurant. And so the day my son came over with his family, and so the two of us imported enough food for all of us. And when I counted all the containers which were on the table, I had, it was really good food, but it gave me this second thought where I almost couldn't enjoy it because it's just so much styrofoam and this and
Mm.
that. And so just even that one meal cooked at home, and you still, assuming you don't grow all your own food, you still have to spend some gas on going to the grocery store and all of that. But yeah, containers is huge, keeping it out of the landfill. Health is probably huge too. I have worked in restaurants. I know
Mm-hmm.
what can go on behind the scene.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you ever talk to anybody who has worked for the health department, has been an inspector, you will be surprised. So yeah, or just even the people factor. And this brings us back to the beginning where we talked about money, right? A lot of people working in the food industry are not paid well. A lot of people are minimum wage workers, and a lot of them need to work every shift just to make ends meet. So if somebody has a cold, if somebody, and this is like one of the big concerns about infectious disease, that people go to work even so they are sick and might, infect a whole bunch of people because of that. That's one. Two, you never know how long the sauce was sitting on the counter or whatever. And so food poisoning is definitely something which happens from eating out. I mean, you can do it to yourself too, but chances are, if that piece of whatever was sitting around for a week and maybe you should not eat it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, and plus you get to,
definitely.
there's so many wonderful advantages to cooking a meal at home. I remember with some of my favorite cookbooks, they really understood the kind of spiritual satisfaction that we get when we lovingly prepare a meal with the best ingredients that we can, especially if they're grown in our garden. People can taste the love, and they do say that it does have a beneficial effect on the body as well. So, yeah, cooking, good idea.
Yeah, do you remember that movie? I think it had chocolate in its theme, but the lady, when she was crying when she was cooking, and then people would eat her foods, and
Yes,
everybody was crying.
yes.
Yeah, that was such a good
I
movie, and
believe the name
you know,
of that movie is called Like Water for Chocolate.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, definitely
Yeah.
a good movie to watch.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about energy and yoga and meditation and so forth. So whatever any energy going into a meal preparation, I would think it affects what comes out of it. And I know that when I don't feel like cooking, usually I don't really like what I made,
Mm.
when you feel inspired and, it just flows differently for
Yeah.
sure. Now, I want to say something else about home cooking. So, there's this whole slow food movement, and that's kind of what we're talking about. And lately, there's a huge push and a lot of podcasters. So if you listen to other podcasts, a lot of podcasts are sponsored by the different companies like I don't know, like Blue Apron or something like that, which, send stuff to your home, which is prepared and all of that. And I think on one level that it's a good idea because it does encourage people to cook. It's definitely only a savings if you happen to go out in restaurants every time. Otherwise, if you're used to buying whole ingredients and cooking your own, it's definitely not a savings. But I think one thing to think about is there's a lot of packaging
Mm-hmm.
involved. And, so if this is what makes you cook at home, then great. But if you can take it one step further, then even better. Like, either buying your own, or there are some places, and that's probably only available in bigger cities. But in San Diego, and I don't even know if this still exists, but we can develop that idea a little bit more. There was a place where you could go to and actually chop your own ingredients. So they would have all the ingredients for certain recipes, and you could pick them, chop them, put them in your own containers, and take them home. And so that was kind of interesting. So people could go, after work, instead of going to the market and picking up all these different things, they could go and it's already, okay, those are those different meals you can
Yeah.
draw. But to take it maybe more into a little bit even more sustainable, why not get together with friends and let's say we are preparing 3 meals and we have all those different ingredients. That way you have no waste. You can put in your own containers, take it home.
That's a brilliant idea. I love that idea. That sounds like a lot of fun. Plus, my biggest issue with cooking is that I get all inspired and I get all my ingredients out and I'm cooking and I'm halfway through and I realize I don't have an ingredient that I need. It's so frustrating, so frustrating. So yeah, that might help me if I had something like that. I think that's a brilliant idea.
And there's always substitutions, It's like
Yes.
like I'm trying to write down some of the recipes and publish them. We talked about like 10 easy things to do with beans, and it's just so hard for me to measure things. I never measure anything. I just throw it in and then I'm like, wait, I wanted to measure it so I can actually, recreate it again
Yeah.
and put it in a form that somebody else can recreate it,
Yeah.
but I'm definitely one of those people, put a dash of this, and, some of that, and, mix it all up.
Yeah, I do that too, definitely. But
Yeah.
well, cool. This has been quite an interesting episode, and we're coming to the close of it. If you all guys have tips, we are looking for them. So again, we're going to be putting up a note. Usually on Mondays, because we call it One Tip Monday. We put it up on our Facebook group, on our Facebook page. We also put it up on Instagram. We put it up all kinds of places. And we also take them via email. So you may see us seeking out your tips via email as well. But we want to share your tips because we learn from them. Everybody who listens learns from them, and we get to give you guys shout outs. We want to mention your names. And just remember, we're still at the beginning of this, so we're not getting that many tips. We're getting some tips. We're getting decent amount of tips.
Okay, I want to say I think we're getting a lot of tips.
The reason I point this out, honestly, is because, we are getting a lot of tips, but what I'm trying to say is that it's not overwhelming at this point. Pretty much, if you give us a tip, more than likely at some point it's going to get on here. So that's the point I'm trying to make, is it's not overwhelming. When you get so many tips that you can only, put out 10% of the ones that you get, then it's overwhelming. So that's the only reason I said that. This is not that we're not getting engagement. You guys are speaking to us and we love it and we want it to keep going and we do want it to grow. But right now at this point, it's kind of your golden opportunity to make sure that you get mentioned. So take advantage of it.
There you go. Okay. And you don't have to wait until Monday. You can send us a tip anytime.
Yep.
Anytime.
All right. And that said, we would like to thank you once again for supporting us. And we love you guys. And we will see you next week.
Yep. Have a great week. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on the Sustainable Living Podcast. For more sustainable living tips, join our Facebook group, Sustainable Living Tips, Tools, and Tactics, and follow us on Twitter.